Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sarah Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
And today we have Dave Moylan.
He's a Kung Fu master and an awesome, really interesting guy.
And he tells his story so beautifully. So why don't we just get into it? Here's Dave.
Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Do you enjoy Bonn Park podcast?
If so, we would really appreciate it if you
Leave a review,
like, rate, subscribe, but most importantly,
share directly from the platforms
with your family and friends. That's the best way to get the word out to everybody, and more people will get to see our show that way. So click those like buttons and share our show. Thank you.
Thanks.
On with the show. This is it. Bonn Park is supported by the St. Jacobs Farmers Market. The market is a community landmark of more than a half century and is the largest year-round farmers market in Canada. Whatever you crave, you'll find it there. There's country classics like fresh apple fritters, cinnamon rolls, and Oktoberfest sausage on a bun, and new favorites like corn-wrapped vegan tamales, Greek gyros, and blooming onions. With almost 300 food and artisan vendors on site, there's something for everyone, and it makes for a great day trip with family or friends. Stay up to date on hours and events by following the St. Jacobs Farmers Market on Facebook, Instagram, or at stjacobsmarket.com. And here's a word from Summer.
I love going to the market with my family. There's so much to see and do. I love trying all the different foods, and it's a great tradition for our family.
David Moylan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You are from the Waterloo Kung-Fu Academy, and you have a special title we were just trying to talk about. Can you explain it to us?
The title is Sigung, which is sort of teacher of teachers. The title I had for most of my years, though, was Sifu, which is, Sifu is a word for teacher. The title Sigung, I didn't choose it myself. I had hosted an event as part of a larger association we belonged to at the Inn of Waterloo years back, and then the people at the event sort of threw the title at me, and it's a bit of an adjustment because Sifu becomes like your name after a long time, and so it was like having a kind of a name change later in my period of trainings.
Tell us all about the academy.
The Waterloo Kung-Fu Academy opened in 1987 under my teacher, who to me it was Sigung or Sifu Bob Schneider. We strictly teach Shaolin 5-animal Kung Fu. We have 4 age programs. Our little ninjas, that's our 4 and 5-year-olds. Our youth, 6 to 10. Juniors, 11 to 14. And then our adult programs, 15 and up. And we're full-time, 7 days a week, morning, evening, noon hour, the whole works. And
how do you get into, when you think of all the martial arts, why Kung Fu? Actually, I don't know a lot about Kung Fu.
Yeah, so I was born in 79, so that can kind of give a reference. At that time, the biggest martial art, most popular is karate. By the old style Karate Kid, is the martial arts for a lot of people is the media, right? Is what brought it to them, and so everybody was drawn to that way, and it's been slowly changing, I think. Wonderful for the advent of Kung Fu Panda, and you have 4 and 5-year-olds asking to do it, but regardless of the age, it's often like a kind of a hero or some inspiration that way, often through the media that brings you to it. People have different reasons. For me, it's kind of silly, but it was my neighbor growing up in town and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which are still around, and I can still kind of connect with the kids. And, the purple guy's Donatello, he uses the staff, like that kind of thing. But as an 11-year-old kid, that gets you excited. It's up and coming cartoon, and away you go. But Probably the most popular question I always get from new people, or really anybody not as familiar with the martial arts, is what's the deal with Kung Fu versus Karate versus Taekwondo? And I always just start with it's a geographical. Kung Fu is any Chinese martial art, and so there's hundreds of types of Kung Fu. And that's the big delineator. A lot of people say, it's more defensive or more angular, more circular. It can be, but there's so many different styles. You can't necessarily pigeonhole it with the generality like that. It's just Kung Fu's Chinese martial arts.
Yeah, so Bob was the brother of Mary Everett. He's a wonderful artist, and she has many, many talents. And I first heard about Bob when I was visiting her house one day, and there was this portrait on her desk, and I said, "Who's that handsome fella?" And she told me about Bob. So can you tell us about your relationship with Bob Schneider?
Yeah, for sure. Trying to think how far back to go. So I started out, as I mentioned, at Waterloo Kung-Fu when I was 11, and he was the one that founded it. It's worth noting he started his journey with Ron Day, who's a big name in the city too, and really started our style. So he was a very well-known instructor there, came from a really strong fitness background, and opened our school in '87. And those two, it's very unusual in the martial arts when students leave and respectfully start another school. There's been so many breakaways in the industry where it's not respectful, but those guys always maintained a great relationship. And we were, the kind of this gentleman's agreement, I think, where Waterloo Kung Fu was the Waterloo side, Kitchener Kicks at the time had their spot. And I actually started my Kung Fu journey at Kitchener Kicks. That's where my neighbor went with Ronday's school. And their schools were always downtown Kitchener. No knock on it. I grew up in downtown Kitchener, going to high school there. But I think for my dad, maybe at the time, it was kind of across from Sammy's there, where Wizards Arcade was and all that. And
a little rough.
Yeah, it was a little rough. So I did my first lessons there, and I think my dad was like, I don't know about this area, like just dropping him off or whatever. Probably would, who knows, whatever. But we had family friends that were involved at Waterloo Kung Fu. So the next week, my dad and I, we went there, sat down with Sifu Bob, which is the way I do it too. All my members, we sit down and meet first in person, which is kind of a more traditional way to do it. And my dad connected. I started there as a young student. That originally was where Grain Harvest is, in that plaza, was our original location from '87 to '92. And so I had this young relationship. He's a mentor. He's the head teacher, and I just totally fell in love with Kung Fu and had done it consistently all the way through. As I became a young man, in '99, I became an instructor, earning my black sash. In Kung Fu, we use sashes more so than belts. The little kids use belts, but we use sashes. Anyhow, as I slowly became an instructor and more comfortable as an adult, I ventured up the courage to chat with him a little more in a social way, because there was always that reverence that you have for him. It's just quick conversation. To be honest, most people, he's a very nice guy, but most people, almost afraid of him. Just the position that he held, not that he really did anything ominous, but
it's that authority that,
the figure that he was. And I was a lifelong CBC fan, and he was a big CBC buff as well. So we started connecting on that. If anybody follows CBC, Jonathan Goldstein has a weird little thing, a wiretap that he did, and some. So we started kind of connecting about CBC and different things, and then as I became of drinking age, we would often have these black sash meetings, and we'd
sounds so secretive, like the magicians meetings. We've talked to magicians about it's the black sash meeting.
It kind of it has a little bit of a history like that. Like the school he came from, Ronday's school, was originally called the Scarlet Dragon Society.
Oh my gosh.
And then I think it is cool, but I think from a family side of things, maybe the thought was it sounds kind of cultish or something, so they call it Kitchener Kicks Family Academy of Martial Arts, and the name change. But yeah, there is because it's such an intense path, becoming an instructor, and everything that you have to go through, and there's not a whole lot of us, there becomes a real camaraderie and that when you get to that level, but there's still always that teacher-student relationship, so you kind of tread lightly into it. But we would once a month have a meeting, which was, now we do in-house, but we would go to local pubs or whatever, and chat. And then I loved doing that. And it was such this amazing opportunity to sit down with my head instructor. And so we would stay until the place closed and not necessarily drinking a ton. We'd maybe take an hour and a half on a pint or something, but whether it was McMullen's uptown or all these different spots. And then I really got to know him better, and my involvement in the school got much more. I started being the one taking minutes at these meetings, organizing them. I ran our demonstration team. I even helped out kind of the maintenance around the school, stocking the change rooms. That's kind of the spirit of a martial arts school too, is that you give back in the teaching, you give back in it's not just like a client kind of relationship. It's a whole different avenue.
This is paralleling Karate Kid a little.
Yeah. I mean, it's the martial arts
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. Like that story, that idea of like, I know Kung Fu practitioners where they brought their teacher in and they live with them, and they literally tell, like, I wash their underwear, I wash their stuff. And even my teacher, Sifu Bob, he connected with a very famous globally martial artist named Grandmaster Pan. Which was pretty cool. He lived next to my high school, but that's a whole other story I could get into. But he's world renowned. But he moved in about 92 and wanted to be immersed in North American culture rather than just kind of sticking to Chinatown in Toronto. So he actually moved in with my teacher and lived on Moore Street near my kid's school right now. And so they had that relationship where Sifu Bob became like a formal disciple of his, and then his influence really came down into our school, because there's a number of schools that are of this 5-animal Shaolin Kung Fu discipline in the area, but ours becomes unique because of his relationship with Grandmaster Pan, and that brought a lot of the Chinese culture to what we do in tradition. So I guess that's a super long answer of how I got to know him. But
that's what this podcast is all about. Right. It's okay.
Yeah.
So Bob Schneider passed away, and then there would have been some kind of transition there that would have taken place where you would have had a new role.
Yeah. So it's a strange story, I suppose. It's as I got to know him better, and we became close over the years. So I became an instructor in 99. He passed away in 06. So we had a lot of years like seeing him every single week. Kung Fu is something I've done consistently since I was 11. Never missed a beat, right? So we got to know each other better and better, and I was studying to be an accountant. I was a chartered
plot twist.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a strange story. I was a chartered accountant. I have a master's degree in accounting, but I got it at University of Waterloo. So that allowed me to continue training. And so part of the way our school works is when you become an instructor, you get a key to the school, and you teach one class a week at least. So my class was Sundays, and I taught that for him for 7 years. In addition to other stuff, I attended his classes too. And so as I was training I did the co-op system. I worked for, I guess they're local, Deloitte, but they're a big international accounting firm, and accounting is very demanding. I was in the audit field, touring all over the place doing that. And one night we were out, there's another instructor that I was really close with too, and we'd be the ones out. So it was actually at McMullen's uptown, which is gone now, but he kind of dropped a bombshell on us. The two of us were sitting there, and then he said, I'm not going to do this forever. He was still young at the time, but he said, someday I'd like to pass the school on to you guys. And so we were floored. We hadn't wrapped our head around the idea of him not being in this the stable position that we've always had. And then, that was kind of it. And we went out many times after, never really talked about it too much, but I would say that conversation definitely planted a seed. And so I sort of had this idea, and he said to me at that time, if people know me really well, I'm good at accounting, but I didn't really enjoy it. I wasn't super passionate about it.
Been there.
Yeah, it was a job, and I like everybody. I had great people that I worked with at Deloitte and mentored me through, and I was successful at it. But it didn't bring me passion, and most mornings I was like almost sick to my stomach, kind of going to clients. It's an intense field to be in. And so he said to me, as a teacher, you get to know your students well. And he goes, I know you're not liking this. And so I thought, well, this is okay. Maybe I'm going to work as an accountant make a lot of money, which was the original maybe thing that draws you to that. And then I'll have enough money to buy the school and then do what I really like. So that was operating in the back of my head. But I don't know if I would have had the courage to make that leap, especially at that time. I didn't have a young family and, all those pressures that come with it, a house, a mortgage, all that kind of stuff that can get you locked into a certain career. So that conversation happened. And then maybe within a year of that, he tragically passed away, which is a whole other story too. He would leave in the summer, doing what we do, being the head instructor of a martial arts school. You're always with people, which is great. I love it. I'm a social person, but you see people all day long. You're always chatting, that sort of thing. So it's nice to just unplug and go away. And that's what he enjoyed. So he would rent a farmhouse in Bayfield. And so the instructors that were there's maybe a dozen of us at the time, would cover all his classes. So that's how we take vacation. The other instructors fill in an extra class, covers his load of classes. And it was actually my lawyer at the time, who's a senior instructor to me at the school. His law firm was right beside the school for a long time. But he called me at Deloitte and had said that he passed away. So, it was a bombshell to the community. Really, really intense news. And the story was kind of, I would say, fumbled by the media at the beginning. Like, it wouldn't have taken much of a search to know that he had run a school for that many years, from 87 to 06. But years back, he had worked as a bartender at the Inn of Waterloo. There was a bar there called Ruby's, I guess, before my time. But I think he had worked. And so that's what they originally sort of reported. And it was this weird story. It's like, and there was no news on what had happened. They had found him and his dog passed away at this farmhouse. It took the police, about a week to determine what had happened. And what it was he had set up a hammock between two trees, and the one tree was rotten at the base, and it fell on him, and he tried to get inside to call for help, I believe, and was found there. So, one of those eerie, like, when it's your time, it's your time. But then we didn't know, Evan and I were very close, and we had talked for, like, what's going to, everyone was wondering what's going to happen with the school. Us as instructors, there's a whole community of people there that are hurting, us included, and what's the future of the school. And then Sifu Bob's siblings, who I only knew a little bit, his sister Mary, and his brother Mike, who's a real interesting guy. He's a presence as well. Mike called me at my apartment at the time and said, "We knew it was our brother's intention to pass the school on to you. Do you want to do this?" And it's like, whoa, okay. This was communicated. I had just gotten married, and I like to travel into Algonquin, backcountry kind of paddling stuff. I had this trip planned with my wife, and I thought, I got to think this through. It was in August. He passed away in June. And that was a good time just to clear out all the noise and reflect on it. And I think what happened, I had just made manager at Deloitte, which is sort of one of the goals as you work your way through the hierarchy of all the positions there.
You work hard.
Yeah, you work hard. You eventually get an office, right? I was out in the field. That was like, you get an office, you're there kind of thing. You pay raise, all this good stuff. So that would have taken effect in September. But I had some thinking to do. Now I had my CA at the time. Now it's CPA, but I thought I can always go back to doing that. But I'll forever regret this if I don't make a go of it. And plus, there's all this tradition of something I've done since I was 11 up until that point. I was 27, and it was like I can't imagine not being there. I was very close with the instructor team there. Probably a dozen of them attended my wedding before that. So I was, kind of a connector with everyone. So before I made the leap, I called every instructor and said, if I do this, will you support me to do it? And they were completely on board with that. Eric, who was my lawyer, was my senior instructor as well. There's still two instructors that were senior to me in my time that are at the school. So he helped me through the legal process with it and everything. And so it was this weird limbo period where I was kind of pretending to do my stay in accounting. In the summer, it's less intense. You're doing all this training and stuff. But then I made the transition, did both for a little bit, where I'd run from accounting into a school of little kids. I never taught the kids, so that was a whole learning curve for me as well. And then just jumped in, and then sort of kept a foot in the door with accounting. I did people's income taxes. I taught an audit course at UW one term, whatever I could do. But then the school grew as I was there. I felt like I had a need to. Seafood Bob ran it in a very simple way, which worked for his lifestyle. But I have 3 young kids and a wife, and I had to grow it to a size that I wanted to make a living doing it. And eventually it took off, and it became very beyond full time. I still teach a lot of classes a week, and then it's running a small business. And I never looked back. It came from hard circumstances, but it's one of the greatest life turns for me. I always feel a little guilty sort of saying that. Obviously didn't want him to pass away, but it changed my life for the positive in a huge way. So
when you mentioned Grandmaster Pan earlier, I have this great visual of him in Victoria Park.
Yeah.
And like his one leg was perpendicular straight up to the rest of his body.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was looking at. And I think he was quite old at that time.
His age was always a mystery. He's a very eccentric guy. If you can look some stuff up even on the internet with him, he would sit with his legs elevated from one seat to the next and put sandbags on his knees so that they actually bent backwards. Ooh. It's pretty wild. He's very, very extreme in the martial arts ends of things. Cover of Kung Fu magazines, all kinds of stuff, and there was this big tournament that Kitchener Kicks has hosted for years, the first Saturday of every May, called Karate Kung Fu Mania. It's been in different locations. It's always at the Dune campus of Conestoga College. It's been at UW, different spots. And Grandmaster Pan would open this thing up with a big exhibition. And yeah, he seemed like this older gentleman, and he would come out, and his big thing was he would say he can kiss his toes. And he would throw his leg up on a desk, and he could, without bending his leg, bend forward and get his mouth to his toes.
I'm wiggling in my chair because I can feel my back hurting just thinking about it. That would be a whole other podcast in itself, but he was this iron palm technique that he did, and he would carry around this little iron thing, and in interviews and everything, he'd just be banging his knuckles on this iron pad, and his knuckles are so calloused it almost looked like fingers kind of growing out of them. And that would be all the photos on the magazines, would be him showing off this hand. And he's renowned. He's done something like Wesley Snipes, all this kind of stuff, and that he had a history in China of helping the police, busting all these gang members and stuff. Like, just this incredible history about the guy. I actually know a martial artist who did at UW his PhD thesis on Grandmaster Pan. I went to attend the defense of it and everything. So yeah, that's a whole other field. But that's fantastic.
Victoria Park was this thing, and he'd take my teacher there at the thing. I essentially feel my job is like an afternoon job. I'm more of an evening person. It resonates with me definitely. So there's some late nights at the academy, but Grandmaster Pan would get Seafood Bob, from what I understand, say, okay, 5 a.m. at Victoria Park, train your butt off, like working hard, like old school ways, like, yeah, very, very much like Karate Kid-esque sort of thing,
This is the part where people often ask us if we are going to run out of guests for Bonn Park, because Bonn Park is strictly local. We only talk to people from this area. Or who have moved to the area or with a connection to the area. But we're never going to run out, are we, Marshall?
No, never.
No, it's never going to happen.
If you ever get close, I can give you a list of 30 people that would be awesome. I'd love to hear you guys interview.
Let me take these notes. Okay, we'll when we run out of guests, we'll contact you.
Please do. I love what you guys are doing. It's such a good format, and I learn about these folks too, right? Like it's. Yeah, and all of them. I learned lots about Mary, about her son Tristan, all the ones I've listened to. I'm like, I kind of know these folks, but now getting to know them at a way deeper level, and sort of mixing it up in the community, it's like you instantly have this great conversation point. My dad worked for Bell Canada for 33 years, local, was like a linesman, and in and out of everybody's houses back when people had phone jacks in their house and businesses and that. So he we would go anywhere, and he would always know somebody all the time, and I always thought that was pretty cool. And I think after being involved with Waterloo Kung-Fu for 31 years and all the people in and out, I'm it's kind of like that. I can't go too many places without running into somebody being in the area the whole time. But I absolutely love that, for sure. Yeah, we're a big, booming, forward-moving city, but it's a small town. Everyone knows each other. Yeah, I've always said that it's like it's small enough to sort of be like Cheers, where you can walk in a place and know.
If this
and know
is Cheers,
somebody.
Marshall is our sober norm.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to throw
Yeah.
sober at you. I just mean you're not just sitting at a bar drunk
Right,
every
yeah.
afternoon. Yeah.
But it totally is that, you know, and then at the same time, you know, big enough that you can get lost if you want to. And, you know, I'm just a huge, I love the local scene. And I think I haven't maybe ventured out too much. I've traveled lots and that kind of thing. But the Pearl Jam lyric from Elderly Women always kind of, you know, I change by not changing at all sort of thing. I stay here and watch everything else kind of change around me. But yeah, I love the area.
Marshall, let's take a moment to hear from this week's sponsor, the St. Jacobs Farmers Market.
And the vendor Kitchen Cuttings, located inside the main market building.
Hi, I'm Ruth from Kitchen Cuttings at the St. Jacobs Farmers Market. Okay, working with cheese is a pleasure. You get to find out what people like and what they don't like. The great variety we have from all over, local, Canada, and imported. Gives a good taste and whatever preferences people have.
Kitchen Cuttings is always a destination for my family at the market. We truly believe it is the best place to find fine cheese. And some of our favorites are the cheese ball, the extra old cheddar, ghost pepper cheddar, which is new, and my favorite, their amazing squeaky cheese curds.
Okay, the cheese curds are very much specialty. They're fresh, they're squeaky, just made the day before. And then there's always different kinds of cheese. We never know from one day to the next what seems to be the kind people prefer. It's amazing, always interesting. We always figure we know what the specialties are, and those are specialties for some people. For some that can't have the regular cheese, like the cow's milk, they can have the goat. It's less protein, we've been told, and the sheep would be more so.
Ruth also talks to us about one of my favorites, the 10-year-old cheddar.
Yes, it has been aged naturally. It's been stored. And then the flavor just increases as you get the years to it. For some people, it's the favorite. You only need a small piece and you got the taste in it.
Kitchen Cuttings, like some of the other favorite vendors at the market, amazingly have been there for over 4 decades.
I've been here for 30 years. Earliest memories, well, it would have to go back to my childhood. But as working, yeah, it's been 30 years, so it's been quite a while. It changes from one year to the next.
I'm always happy to see that bustling counter at the St. Jacobs Farmers Market. You know you're coming upon Kitchen Cuttings, and the customer service is always top notch.
They're the ones that got me hooked on that Gouda with caraway. I can't stop the stuff. So don't forget to visit Kitchen Cuttings in the main market building. And now back to the show.
Well, you rode your bicycle over here.
Yeah.
I got to interview Neil Peart of Rush one
Oh
time.
my God, right on.
And Neil told me how something he figured out while touring with Rush kind of early on was he could put his bike on the tour bus.
Yeah.
And he could arrive in every city really early in the day. They do sound check and all that stuff. And they had hours then to kill.
Yeah.
And he always took that time to explore the city on his bicycle. And he said, and the reason this works so well, he said, you put a bike helmet and sunglasses on and you become anonymous.
Yeah.
And he said, the second thing is nobody's threatened by a guy on a bicycle kind of thing.
Yep.
So you can strike up conversations, talk to strangers.
Oh, he's on a bike. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a Harley. Yeah.
And he said only occasionally did the person he's talking to sometimes realize, holy crap, I'm going to see Rush tonight, and this is Neil Peart. Otherwise, he was pretty anonymous. And he talked about how one of the greatest joys of touring, or he said sometimes the downfall of touring is having to kill time somewhere. He said, but when you have a bicycle, you could go anywhere.
Yeah.
And he said, and he would go anywhere. How's that for you, the exploration of Waterloo region on your bicycle?
Yeah, this is a hot topic of mine too. In addition to Kung Fu, I'm a super avid cyclist. I've been doing that for about 23 years. So I commute everywhere on my bike. There's different modes of biking. I'm primarily a mountain biker. The hydro cut that's here, which is like one of the best, I would say, in the country, if not the province, is so well done. I could go on about that for a long time. I actually have an ad. I sponsor the hydro cut. So there's a picture of Bruce Lee, and it's got his, he did an interview with,
Take your time because we can edit, right? We can just say Bruce Lee did an interview again.
Who's the really old Canadian interviewer guy that wrote all the books that,
This is Marshall's territory.
Pierre Burton.
Oh.
So Pierre Burton did a famous interview with Bruce Lee, and that's his quote, his "Be Like Water" quote, if you've heard it. If not, drive to the Glasgow parking lot of the Hydro Cut, and that quote is on the billboard on our ad. But it's an iconic quote. We have it up in my weight room at the school on the wall. Be like water, and it's about this ability to adapt. It's about, I won't try and paraphrase the quote, but it's, you put it into different containers, it becomes a container. Water can flow, it can crash. I thought it was kind of a neat PSA for the guys at the Hydro Cut, because you have to be relaxed, and it's the Hydro Cut. It kind of has that tied in. So I'm primarily a mountain biker. I belong to a grassroots mountain bike club that we've cycled together every Wednesday night for 23 years. We're called the Missing Links. Kind of no official, tie-in. But then I've gotten into all these different modes of biking. There's road biking. There's gravel biking, which is the latest thing that I've been into for the last bunch of years. That's the bike that I rode here. So road biking to me is the most dangerous. You would think mountain biking, hitting off all these jumps and stuff. Road biking is crazy because dump trucks, cars, especially with the advent of cell phones, people don't watch. I know people that have died from it. So with gravel biking, you get into the buggy roads. You learn a whole other network of trails, the whole trail system of the city. Through the pandemic, even I've really dove into that, and my friend Boyd and I, we've developed a 100-kilometer urban gravel ride that goes around the entire region, like from Mennonite country down to the Dune campus, like by Homer Watson's house, up the other side, and it's 100K that I now know. It took the whole start of the pandemic to figure out how to navigate this and do all these trails. And that was a whole thing, experiencing things through all that. I do fat biking, which is a whole other thing. Each Wednesday, we rotate to about 8 different spots within the greater area. This past Wednesday, we rode Guelph Lake. We ride at Pusslinch out in Cambridge area, the Hydro Cut, Kelso, Hamilton area a lot, Dundas, Waterdown. There's a whole rotation, and then I have different guys that are experts of the trails that have this knowledge of the trail system in their
intimate
heads.
knowledge of it.
Yeah, because they're not known. Like my friend and I tried to ride Guelph Lake on Wednesday by ourselves, and we've ridden there for 23 years, and we were horribly lost. We were kind of laughing, like 23 years, and we can't figure out how to get through this. Now it's at night, we're kind of going, but yes, cycling has opened up a lot of doors. There's a whole community of people that are involved in that, and it's probably the next closest thing that I love as much as Kung Fu, and it really is a way to connect the whole city. It's the best way to get around, for sure.
The Missing Links is a great name.
Yeah,
Two things come to mind. One is that great 1980s puzzle that was kind of like a Rubik's Cube puzzle.
Oh yeah.
The Missing Link. Also the name of one of my favorite professional wrestlers of all time, played by a guy named Dewey Robertson. He was called the Missing Link. So when I heard that, I thought, that's an awesome name.
Yeah, it's a double play. We've made a bunch of jerseys and stuff over the years, and I'm kind of working on some new artwork to come up with some swag for us. But we've had the classic of like the ape turning into Cro-Magnon Man, turning into riding a bike sort of thing, and then it's a double play on the links on your chain, sort of missing, right?
Great name.
It's been a thing. We do all kinds of races and stuff over the years. Those 24-hour races, got to know everybody that way, and it's there's in the world of cycling, if you run out of guests, there's so many interesting stories and people that I could direct you to as
So
well.
if things start to fall apart, Marshall, we're just going to Dave, and he's gonna.
Yeah.
I tried the group cycling thing a while back as a total newbie, but what I found was, and I didn't stick with it because our leader got hit on the road once, and I just freaked it, hit, and I just freaked out, and just I was too scared to go back, and I was just like, this is my limit, I'm fine. So and I went to spin. Spin was for me then, and maybe as a cyclist, spin might be a bit of a joke to you, but it worked for me. But what I found was that the cycling community that I was involved with for the time that I think we were called the Waterloo Wanderers. It's a small group, all ages. It's like the podcasting community. I came with just my regular Canadian Tire Supercycle. Yeah. Next week, somebody's like, I'm bringing you a bike. You can try this one, see what you like. The week after that, we think you're going to like this one. You should try this bike. Or why don't you borrow my helmet? Or try my mirror. See if that makes you feel more comfortable on the road. Like, everyone was so helpful, even though it wasn't maybe as intense as what you guys are up to, with the Missing Links are up to. And we found that too with our creative projects locally. Like, people just seem to be helpful. They just want to share advice.
That's what originally drew me to it. I was just telling this to somebody the other day, like, especially even in the culture of mountain biking, the first time you're at the side of the trail with a flat and there's a million people that stop by to help you help you out. And then I was like, man, this is just such a great community of people. an interesting example, kind of side story. You mentioned Neil Peart. From the inception of the pandemic, I've always wanted to study an instrument, and I tried to get into drums. At first, my son Marshall, I enlisted him at Long and McQuaid, and I convinced the teacher to let me sit in on the lessons, which he wasn't keen on at first, but I was picking up all the rudiments and stuff, and then so part of Kung Fu. Part of what we do is this traditional thing called lion dancing, Chinese lion dancing. I have to always enunciate that to say lion, because a lot of people think I'm saying line dancing, and then images of achy breaky heart and that kind of thing
Lion.
come up. Yeah, lion. A lot of people see it and they call it dragon dancing or whatever, but it's the stuff you see in the parades in Chinatown, weddings, that sort of thing, and it's a whole other story unto itself how we got into that, but which is a big practice. We perform UW, Lunar New Year, very, very involved. But there's a giant sort of timpani style drum that you use for that. And we're very fortunate. Our drummer for our line dance team, his name is Adam Bowman. He's a professional drummer, but he's also a martial artist that trains with a mentor to me in Guelph, Sifu Robin Young, who was a peer of Sifu Bob, which is a whole other story. I've been very fortunate to connect with his peers after he passed away. Some wonderful long-term teachers in the area. I'm getting off on tangents all over the place here.
That's what we do here.
I'll try and keep it a bit on the tracks. It's coming back to drumming here at some point. So over the years, I get to know Adam, who drums for us, and we developed a relationship. And I was always curious to study drums from him. And so when the world all locked down, he was very much laid up. He was teaching at U of Guelph and performing, touring the world and everything. And I was in different circumstances too. Anyways, the stories get kind of strange, but a friend of ours, this is a sad part of the story, had passed away in the February just before the pandemic. A guy my age of bile duct cancer, John Nurnberg. Just one, when people pass away, I always say it's such a nice guy, but this guy legitimately was one of the greatest guys around. And we were at his funeral wake at Descendants Brewery, and some of my Kung Fu students were there, mutual connections. And I ran into, I never had met him before, this Rob Sonoda from the Center in the Square, I guess. And we got chatting about drums. I guess he used to drum. And he said, I have a drum kit if you need, because I was kind of getting to the point with my son where we were going from the pad to needing a kit. And I thought, well, I just met this guy at a funeral thing. It would be strange borrowing a drum kit from him. And then a month later, the world shut down, and I got his email, got through, and he said, yeah, we'll get the drum kit, which he gave me a full Yamaha drum kit for a $75 donation to his church, which was really neat. And I picked it up on April 1st, the day the Center in the Square had decided to close down. I remember that so vividly. My son and I brought it to the Kung Fu school, which is, I have a 5,000 square foot facility that I've been locked down, and I thought it essentially became sort of a jam hall, practice space for me. Didn't even know how to set it up. I had to kind of get it going, and then Adam and I did some lessons remotely, and I taught extensively online to kind of keep the business going, and then when I would turn off the online thing just to keep my head, I would relentlessly practice through all the basics of drumming. I understood it from a point of view of like the approach you would take to the martial arts and grinding through the basics and that, knowing, and they're both arts of coordination. There's so many parallels. I've written blogs about how the two. Adam has written articles about the parallels between drumming and the martial arts. We always describe our style of martial arts as a percussive style of martial arts. So as things evolved, I got this relationship with Adam where he wanted to develop his martial arts, so we would get together. I would teach him martial arts, and then he would teach me drumming, and it's just flourished to this. I was at the academy last night at midnight practicing. I set up I have to take my kit down and up now that we're open again, but I'm trying to go down that road. So, anyways, is neat mentioning Neil Peart. What a cool opportunity to.
That's fantastic.
The greatest of all time. So yeah.
When you first got here, I noticed that you're wearing a Real Static shirt. We geeked out for quite a while.
Yeah.
I have been staring at your chest a little bit while you're talking, and it's not because I'm a pig. It's because you're wearing this great
Because
shirt.
he's super fit.
Well, you are super fit. But it's because you're wearing this great shirt with a beautiful graphic on it. So I'm wondering, we talked about Neil Peart. We geeked out about Real Statics on a high level before we hit record. Did Neil Peart and Dave Clark's collaboration on the song Guns from Whale Music influence you at all with your love for playing drums, or was it something else?
No, I love both those guys, but no, it's
Because that's a weird song.
Yeah, it's that's true. It's kind of meanders off and on with all the drums. No, I think I always wanted to. I'm a massive live music fan. I was going to, at least a show a week.
And that's
for
what
as long as I can.
I was
remember.
saying is for sure we've been in the same room before together. For
I would
sure.
think so. Probably 80 times from what I hear you guys talking about too, and I always enjoyed reading your columns too, Marshall, about it and that, and yes,
David.
hooked up whatever I could. I last night was listening to the Jay Leonard podcast, and he's talking about echo and that sort of stuff. I grab those all the time, try and find out where things are playing, and anyways, the Social Kindred app is very cool too. What a spot if we had that back in the day. So I was always drawn to watching it. I didn't come from a musical family. In university, to try and sort of de-stress a bit, I formally took guitar lessons in my neighborhood with a great guy, Steve Adams, who from my understanding was Steve Strongman's teacher, who's that's a whole other tradition. Him and Rob Zabo would go every Christmas to Starlight there and take that in. But I was studying it formally, and it was good, and I was learning. I didn't want to learn to read music at the time. I just wanted to learn songs and kind of blow off some energy that way. I have lots of energy, and then get married, have kids. That was kind of on the back burner for a bit, and then. In some ways, I'm not necessarily at all saying drumming is easier, but just the percussive nature of it sort of lent to my nature more. And then as I explored it through lion dance, and I always appreciated certain drummers and from a musical point of view, but once I started diving into it, it just resonated. I'm very, very much still a beginner in it, but that thought where, my teacher would say, well, if you really want to get good at this, just sit at your pad every day and set a timer for 10 minutes and just practice singles and practice doubles. And to most people, like, that's too boring. They don't want to get there. But that's the martial arts. Like, sitting in a horse stance, throwing single alternate punches is really the ticket to getting better at it. But nobody wants to go through that grind. But I think I get that. And, there's so many parallels with it. We've done some cool stuff, Adam and I, together where I work the speed bag, which I kickbox with a teacher as well every week. I kind of am in all these different modalities, weightlifting, yoga, this kind of thing. And
we hear you.
So I'm very active, commute every day, do all these different things. And we were having one of these sessions where we drum and do Kung Fu. And so the speed bag is a very rhythmic instrument. That's the one you see boxers hitting, the little sort of peanut style thing that you work at. And I was working with Adam teacher. He goes, those are 16th note triplets, and he sits down on the drum kit, starts pounding up the pattern. So he goes, I got an idea, and he sets up his video camera, and he has a drum pad. So I start my rhythm, which I'm okay at that, getting a rhythm down on the speed bag, and then he comes running in and starts matching the beat on the drum pad, which is super cool. He threw it up on his own kind of social media, but there's so many neat little tie-ins all the time that I'm finding, and I think. The study of drums is reinvigorated me as a martial arts teacher, in the sense that I'm in the beginner shoes again of knowing how beginners experience things, and there's even all these weird lesson tie-ins where I could take like a paradiddle and go, oh, that's like, jab reverse double hook or something. Like I can kind of see patterns in the drumming rudiments that tie into the striking rudiments that we have in our Kung Fu style. So it's kind of weird.
In the years that I spent at Grand River Karate and watching Sensei Fortunato teach, the lessons would start off with a workout. Lots of jumping jacks, lots of push-ups, right?
Calisthenics.
Yeah. And then adults and kids would move into their groups, practicing their katas along the way. There'd be demonstrations by Fortunato and the other senseis. But the thing for me that was most memorable and most meaningful was kind of more when Fortunato would speak at the end, often to the kids. And he'd talk about the way the lessons learned in that dojo can transition beautifully into your real life. And the one that really stood out for me was Fortunato saying how, we talk a lot about keeping your head up. Keep your head up, right? Because when you're walking down the street, keep your head up. Look around. Don't be doing this. And Fortune would kind of do this walk that we see a lot when kids are walking back and forth to school where they're looking down at their feet, right?
Yeah.
And I remember that was a very powerful message that I hope those kids took away with them. And Fortune would say how this will do you well in life. Keep your head up and look around. And can you kind of take us home by talking about Kung Fu in that way and how the things that you're teaching, there's a lot more going on there than the physicality of Kung Fu.
Absolutely. The thing that we throw around the school a lot is we look at like Kung Fu as a metaphor for life. And part of moving to the instructor level, black sash level, in addition to like a 6+ hour test and years of lead up and training to it, is you write we call it like a black sash thesis. And that's often the topics, kind of open-ended, describe Kung Fu as a metaphor for life. And there's so many ways, so many areas where it can be like that. It's always this sort of paradoxical thing because, you traditionally think of always kicking, punching as self-defense. Certainly martial arts is born out of the need for self-defense, but Kung Fu comes primarily initially from a meditative background. And so we start all of our classes with some meditative breathing, the idea of focusing on the moment, being in the present. And we end all our classes with a quote. Every week we have a different quote around different monthly themes that we have. And, there's themes that you would think, respect, community, courage, perseverance. Those are some of the ones we've had in the last little bit. And then we'll pick a famous person through history and read that quote and develop it with all the age groups, right? From the kids up to our adult program. And there's constantly lessons that transcend just the physicality of the martial arts. We're always trying to talk about the idea of like connecting your work ethic with what you achieve. And that's really the initial goal. Last night I had 2 kids earn their first belt, which is such a huge thing. And it's just maybe something simple as, they had to demonstrate 10 push-ups to earn their belt, but they had to work at that. And we don't just give it to them. There's that connection. And then the lights start to go on. It's like, oh, I worked at this. And then the self-esteem starts to happen. This idea of being in the moment is such a big deal. And from a young age, this thing I started there in 1990, there was no internet. But we, as cell phones took root, my teacher was always very, very strict, never to have, no cell phones in the school, never have them on. So I know I heard in one podcast that you don't have a cell phone, or maybe you didn't at the time, which I thought was really, really cool.
For the moment, still doesn't.
Okay, that's awesome. I'd love to understand more about how that all works. But yeah, I mean, even just from a self-defense point of view, you watch people crossing the street and their head isn't like you're going to get hit by a car or a bike or something, but keep your head up, keep your wits about you. But really that's more of being in the moment. And so we still have signs everywhere, keep your cell phones off. Even as the advent of like all this evolution sort of happened with the internet, things happen, people are getting to these smart watches, and we've always had a pretty strict jewelry policy, but that's the last thing I want as a student, looking at their wrist going, oh, I have a message. It pulls their mind out of the moment. And that's with this idea of mindfulness, and it's in yoga as well and a lot of other disciplines. But when you come to a class, even for an hour, and you give yourself up completely to your own pursuit and just focusing on what you're doing in that moment, it has such an effect of relaxing other areas of your mind. It's like taking a little vacation in some ways. And that's one small example, but probably the most pervasive is that idea of being in the moment and developing some focus that transcends into really any other aspect, even just having a conversation, right? So, which is, I think, one of the more important things of life and humanity and all that. So, yeah, Kung Fu is a metaphor for life. Pick an option, and I'll run with it. But there's a ton of parallels that way. So, yeah.
Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.